Hello and welcome. I'm just going to share us sideways to the Parenting from the Heart podcast. Today I have the wonderful Aoife Griffin. In fact, you can see our name. So this is going to be recorded for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel so that you can watch us or you can listen to us, whatever you prefer. So Aoife, hello. It's so lovely to be here.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And you're in Dublin, aren't you?
I am in Dublin, yes, in a less than sunny Dublin this morning, but yes, that's where I am.
It's very sunny here. So it says Vietnam and Dublin on the line. So I'm really excited to have Aoife on because, well, one, she's wonderful, but also I work with Aoife. I do quantum flow with her every week. So feel free to message me about that. And so I see her every week and she's just very awesome. And I have also seen her because she is a healer. So to introduce her, Aoife is a healer. She's an author. She's a mom of 4 and she is a cycle breaker parent in her own right. And she's just an all-round awesome human being. And if you do come and join me on The Turning Point, which is my program where I support cycle breaker parents with healing plus skills equals the parent that you really want to be, you will meet Aoife because Aoife will do a guest slot. She's going to work one-to-one with each client for a special session. And also, Aoife, are you going to do the bonus, if anybody wants to, the optional bonus, which is a womb healing workshop, which is ridiculously powerful. So it's really interesting for, people listening to the podcast. I trust Aoife and I love Aoife, so it's really great for you to get to know her, and she knows so much. And also, you get to kind of try her out, get to know her a bit, and then you learn more about how it works when you're working with me and with us. So we're doing a whole series. I mean, we just have so much to talk about. So we're doing a whole series, but we want to start today. This is number 1. And basically, when we're thinking about what is the root of what both of us do and help people with, it's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, it's really interesting because you've had it because people go to Aoife for all kinds of things, which she's going to talk about in a minute. But a lot of people say, I don't have trauma. I guess I'm not really a cycle breaker parent because I actually had a really nice upbringing and my mom loved me and my dad loved me, or, my stepdad, whatever your family looked like. And so I can't have trauma. And we were talking about that earlier, that people have this view of trauma equals something in a Marvel comic that would turn you into Spider-Man or something, doesn't it?
Your origin story has to be horrific, like Batman. If your parents weren't dead on the street, did you really have trauma? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about stories so obviously, if you grew up in a really chaotic household, it's sensible, and these kind of people, it's obvious trauma. An easy way of thinking about it, it's not necessarily that accurate, is trauma with a capital T. I know if I grew up with an alcoholic parent, if I was beaten, that kind of thing, yes, that's kind of obvious. In which case, you can move forward with therapy or coaching or whatever you want to do. But also, we were just talking before we came on that, me as the baby of 5, so I'm the youngest of 5 children, and we had 2 moms, 5 kids. It was a blended family, 2 moms, 5 kids, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and at one point we actually had sheep living in urban Leicester City. It was crazy, and we weren't hurt. And if you have a household with a mom and a dad, and they have, an affluent household, this child can be listened to. And in our household, there was just too much going on, and that's okay. Does that mean you weren't loved? No, you can still be loved, but also you can still have that gap, that wound, that we could call it, even refer to as the lowercase t trauma, and you're allowed to heal from that. Because if your children aren't listening to you in later life, when you've gone through your adulthood and your early adulthood and you've got your kids, and then they're not listening to you, and you find that fills you with rage, maybe there's something in there. And do you have a right to heal, even if you didn't have a Batman origin story? Even if it is as simple as, I have lots of siblings and I love them, but I was never hurt. You're allowed to heal.
Yes.
So would you like to share some of your experience about, trauma being stored in the body? Because this is a lot of what Aoife works with, and Aoife has actually supported me with this, which is why I want her on board. I'm so happy she agreed. This is why I want her on board with the turning points. This is why she's going to work with, our clients.
Well, there you go. But that's the whole thing about trauma. And I suppose, like what you said, I would have had, a lovely childhood where, I was the eldest of 3. And, on paper, everything looks all shiny and lovely. But again, when you start to go through the healing process, you realize that actually, do you know what? Your voice wasn't validated. I was told to not be myself in certain circumstances because like that, I didn't know at the time, but I was incredibly empathetic. And I used to feel.
Now it's your superpower. That's what makes you so special.
And I could literally feel my mum's pain and my sister's pain. And when I did hypnosis as part of, when you're like, I'm a hypnotherapist, and when you're going through that, you get to receive an awful lot of healing and therapy and work through all your own shit before you go to work with others. And one of the things that came up for me.
Thanks, Aoife. That's an explicit warning on the podcast.
Sorry.
No, go for it, because this is real life, and people need to meet both of us. Either because they're just listening to the podcast and it's great, but you don't have to be. It's another lesson. You don't have to be super serious. Like, healing isn't scary. It can be fun. Like, we laugh all the time. Like yesterday, I did a session with Aoife yesterday, and like there was laughter and there was crying and there was swearing and there was giggling and there were as close as you can get to air hugs across 6,000 miles. And actually, trauma healing can be joyful as well, can't it?
Because you do feel, and this is the thing, and I know we're kind of going around in circles a little bit, but when we have trauma in our bodies, right, a lot of it makes you feel really heavy. Okay, so a lot of the clients who come to me feel like they have a weight. And like what I said to you yesterday was, when we go in, the way we kind of look at the body, I'm a holistic healer. So I think when we are holding trauma or anything that's happened in our bodies, we hold it in our mind, we hold it in our bodies, we hold it in our nervous system, we hold it in our energy field. And again, that might be a bit too woohoo for some of you, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody. But
a year ago, it was too woo for me.
2 years ago,
and now I healed a wound, a psychological wound that was held in my rib when you asked me yesterday, and it was.
And that's the thing, you don't know until you go in. And I turned around to you and like that, and I say this to everybody. I want you, when we get onto that hypnosis state and we get nice and relaxed, I go to you and I say to you, I want you to find where in your body you're storing your trauma or where you're storing that emotion. And
and if people don't like the word trauma, you don't use it.
No, and again,
it's that feeling, that wound, that thing.
And it's really funny because you don't know where it's held until you go in, and you do this little body scan thing. And for some people, it's really obvious. It's like, oh, it's going to be my heart, and then you go in.
That was what I thought going in. I thought it would be either in my brain, in my head, and I would be aware of it, or it would be in my heart. And
that's it, because you think, everything. Or a lot of us hold things in our stomachs because we're like, I feel nauseous, or I feel this. And a lot of, like, your stomach is usually the seat of your emotion. But when you go in and you're actually holding trauma, it's stored in different kind of less obvious places. And like you just said, it was in your rib. I've had people who say it's in their feet, their thumb, their backs, their necks, their jaw. I had another woman who was like, it's in my nose. How could it be in my nose? And I'm like, well, that's where it is. So there's no right or wrong. It just is. Don't overthink it. Let's see what comes up. And then the other element of it is, and this is really kind of a little bit more out there for some people, but when you actually talk, like, you can actually talk to your body. And that's something that we aren't taught as children, but we actually have so much more power to communicate with our bodies and our systems than we think.
Do you know, it's interesting you said that, because Becky Shuttleworth, who was on the podcast a while ago, who I also collaborate with a lot, she's a child mental health mentor, and she's a yoga instructor. She lives and breathes the yogic lifestyle, and she supports children to tune into their bodies. And these are the children who are coming home from school, and the parents tend to get in touch with Becky, because they're saying, they're always saying they're feeling sick at school. but they're not actually poorly, and we know they're not. And it's like, yes, this is a physical manifestation of anxiety. This is stress. And actually we know, and I'm doing it now. I know for the people on the podcast, you can't see it, but my shoulders have gone up because I'm talking about it. And this is the lived experience of it. And it is what it is. We know that our bodies tense up. And actually
and that's what trauma is. And that's the thing that we know with the capital T, small t thing. Trauma is literally anything that makes your body brace on impact. So anything that makes you go, that's trauma for your body. That's literally your nervous system reacting, going, oh my God, how do I respond? That's your fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. That's your survival instinct going.
Is that even when you jump in a cold swimming pool? It's a micro trauma.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. Everything isn't a massive thing. It can be those little things where, and I see it with a lot of clients who come to me about weight issues, is, you know, they were always told you can't leave the table without finishing your plate. You know, think the starving children. You know, you have to, and they're taught not to listen to their bodies. Yeah. They're taught not to go, I'm full. Well, like
toilet training, when people say training, but if you take the other approach, is learn how to listen to your body. Actually, they tend to be the children who maybe train, you know, maybe learn about the toilet later, but it sticks because they've learned how to listen to their body, not train, because they're not dogs. And you actually can train humans like that, yes, but at what cost? And cycle breaker parents don't want to do that
because it's harder. But we are thought, and I don't know about you, but when I was going through my healing journey and all my issues, and we'll talk about that at another time, I literally felt like there was literally a bar that went, my head is up here and my body's down here, and there was a complete separation of the two. And I literally had to learn how to get out of my head and into my body because we were at war.
And it's interesting because in our society now, and I know it's really easy to say, we were talking about how, you know, it's not just as cycle breaker parents, it's not just, oh, my parents didn't do this, or oh, my parents did do this. Sometimes it's something in your environment, or I talked about how when I was bullied for a while at school when I was a kid, and I had gone to my teacher and I'd said, you know, this child's bullying me, and, you know, I'd had a cry about it at break time. And then this teacher had moved the class around, you know, as you do each term. And I was a class teacher, very different class teacher to this one that I had. And they put me next to him. And I do know, because in my teacher training, they say, you know, if you have a child who was bouncing all over the place, maybe put them next to somebody who was calmer so they can have that example. And I didn't do that, because I know what it was like to be that person who was lumped next to that person, and it was horrible.
And it is and again, that's another form of trauma, and that is
but it was because every day, and I remember feeling sick. I had the Sunday night blues when I was like 9 years old, and eventually it came to a confrontation which my 9-year-old self didn't deal with as well as she probably could have if she'd have had skills, but, you know, he never bothered me again. I'll give it that much. But it didn't need to, but it didn't need to come to that. But this is where, you know, my trauma response was, nobody's coming. This is the lack of the empathetic other.
How horrific is it that at 9 years old, you're saying, A, your voice isn't heard.
Nobody believes me.
You've spoken to an adult, which again is traumatic for a child, to have to brace themselves and be honest and go, this is happening to me. Please.
And he was bigger than me and scared.
They did the opposite, and they re-traumatized you by putting you sitting beside them, until a point where your body literally went, instead of I've tried freezing, I've tried fawning, I've tried asking for help.
And these are my natural responses, because I'm a very quiet, I'm actually quite introverted person. And in the end, I'm just going to tell you, it was old school, you know, the desks, the wooden desks. Yeah, I nearly broke his arm. I mean, I'm not particularly proud of it, but it's just that sign of, you're right, I'd gone through fawn, I'd gone through freeze, I'd gone through flight, and I couldn't get away because they then put me next to him, and in the end, I had to fight back.
Yeah, and that
it could have been so different.
And that's the problem, that if we aren't supporting kids or adults or parents or each other, like, I want you to think about it for a minute, like, in your body at that time, there was a physical response. And that's the thing about trauma. This is why we say we hold it in our bodies and our nervous system as well. There is physical signs that you may not be listening to. And I just say to my own clients, your body is always talking to you. It starts off with a whisper. So it starts off with that little niggle, that, you know, that little knot in your stomach.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That little headache. That little kind of, oh, you know, when you kind of feel pins and needlesy, you know, that sort of response.
It's that ick feeling, and that ick is your intuition, isn't it? That's the communication.
And then it grows to kind of anger or withdrawal, or when your kids get quiet, or like we talked about, people going mute, you know, where you don't actually speak, where you're having panic attacks, where, you know, you can't sleep.
And that's the roar, isn't it? That's when it's like, listen to me.
And it gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And in my case, it went from feeling nauseous and feeling anxious to ending up with a full-blown heart condition, because I didn't listen to the whisper. And that's the problem. And this is why, if we can cycle break and get people to start listening to their bodies and their gut instinct, because we are, like you say, the little things. And it's crazy because as parents, we don't mean harm when we say, come on, one more bite. Come on, more. Let's try and encourage.
Well, this is fear, isn't it? It's our fear and our love for our children. Like, please eat, because I know you haven't eaten enough protein today, because we just want the best for them. And also that's what we know, because that's what our parents had said. And there is an element of that, you know, it's not necessarily down to our individual relationship with our parents. That is the biggest reason, to be honest. And I know we talked about there are other things, it doesn't have to be, but most of it is the parenting style that we experience. That's just how it was done in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
Our parents didn't know how to support us through our feelings, and they would never support through their feelings, so they pass it down through the intergenerational line of like, oh, come on, it's not that bad, is it? I did an interview with a pet.
That label, the whole thing of, you know, oh, you're always the sensitive one, the hysterical one, oh, don't listen, there she goes again, you know, yeah. And that
he's flouncing off again, yeah.
And then you start living up to that label.
Or fighting against it.
Yes.
And yeah, then you have that choice of like, live up to it and acquiesce and just not be true to yourself. And you will never be true to yourself until you heal that. Or fight. And then that breaks the connection with the families, isn't it? This is where people draw away from their families, spend all their time at friends' houses, or, you know, move out at very young.
As soon as they can, yeah. And like that they take on certain roles in the family to try and get that attention and that love. Like they become the carer, the rebel, the brilliant one, you know, the quiet one. Like you take on these roles.
The mummy's helper. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that becomes your identity, just to feel loved and to feel included and to be part of it. But then that's not healthy either. You know.
It's a coping mechanism, and it's a sensible one at that age where you have no power.
Yes. And this is, I suppose, about us empowering parents so that they can empower their kids, and then we have this lovely generation of the next people who go,
yes. And this is where we have the healing plus the skills. You know, we need to heal ourselves from these wounds and unpeel. You know, we need to unpeel these layers of crap. Yeah.
Layers of shit. Let's just be honest here. And we don't know how much, and this is the part of the problem that I think so much of us don't know, because we'll turn around and we say, right, we don't have trauma in our lives. We didn't get raped as a kid. That's what I get from a lot of women, is I was never raped, so how could I possibly have trauma in my womb?
Or I was never beaten. I was never beaten.
So
therefore my parents did good, because they did love me. And yes, they did. Yes. And yes, yeah. And like, yeah, you know, also there is another point of you saying, just because you didn't have horrific things in your background, and yes, other people have had it worse, if we can call it that, it doesn't mean that your pain is negated.
Yes.
Your wound may be smaller than somebody else. If you think of it in a hospital, if you have somebody with you know, a gaping wound, like, yes, in triage they are going to go straight through to surgery, and that is right. But if you have you know, a slow burning infection, you do deserve healing too. And it is the same for emotional and, you know, the spiritual side. Yeah, somebody who's had a horrific background, you know, who has had like a, you know, a Batman style upbringing or whatever, yes, they do deserve care. And yes, of course, you know, people who are growing up in war zones, of course they deserve access to trauma support. And so do you, no matter what it is. So do you. If you have something that's stopping you showing up as the parent you want to be, and you know that you have layers of artifice shit on top of your real self, you know, that sparkly golden, you know, you talk about the sparkly golden core of who we are. If you have layers that other people have given you, or that you have wrapped around your true self because your true self wasn't safe, you deserve to heal.
And it's fun, and it's okay to say that. It's okay to turn around and go, do you know what? I didn't have massive trauma. I was really lucky. However,
Yeah.
I am triggered whenever my husband or my partner says X, when my kids do Y, when the mom at the school gate says this, this, and this, when I look at this on TV, when I hear this, and that's okay. The first step is noticing that you are triggered and being able to step back. There could be something here. There's not something obvious.
That's called getting curious, isn't it?
Yeah, there's
being
curious. Obvious. You literally, and this is how we start every flow class, is I want you to observe your body without judgment or criticism. Because once you start to get aware of your body and come in, and even if just for today, if all you do after listening to this podcast today is that you go away at the end and you take 30 seconds, set a timer on your phone for 30 seconds and just check in with your body. And literally just close your eyes and go, how am I actually feeling in my body right now? And just get sense of awareness and no judgment. Don't go, oh my God, this is this or this is that. And don't look in the mirror and go, oh my God, I hate this or this. This isn't about that. This is literally about going, actually, do you know what? I do have a little bit of an ache here that isn't an obvious one. I do have, my body does respond in this way every time this happens. And just start becoming aware. Okay, that's just your first step with kind of acknowledging, okay, maybe there is a little bit of trauma here. Maybe I am holding on to something.
Yeah, and if you're not ready to call it trauma, just call it what it is. It's a block. It's a thing. Yeah. It's a stoppage. And I always say, like, we're going to do a different podcast on this, which is called The Lesson of the Low. I haven't got a title for it. I tend to get people who ring or message me and they're like, I lost my shit today and it was scary. It was scary for the children and it was scary for me. And I knew it was coming and I finally tipped over the edge. I need some support. And I always say, congratulations, you got it. Wouldn't it be nice if we could listen to the whisper? And this is like our raison d'etre, isn't it? It's like, listen to the whisper, heal when it's a whisper. And unfortunately, and in our cases, we are living proof, we didn't listen to the whisper.
And this is why we're trying to teach others. Don't end up like us. Don't end up sitting in a hospital like I did, across a table from somebody going, yeah, your heart is failing, liver is failing, and you have 3 months to live. And that was stress and trauma. That was nothing. I didn't have anything major. I didn't have anything horrific. I didn't have anything that you could turn around and go, well, that's where that began. But I had accumulation of layers and layers and layers and layers and layers where I neglected and abandoned myself because that was what I was taught to do. And now when you clear it all and you're just like, yeah, I actually really love me.
Yeah.
And I really love who I am. And I love the mum that I am now. And I love the person I am now. And I love the work I do now.
And you are spreading light now because you are able to, because you have allowed yourself to, by healing.
Yes.
And skills.
And it is the combination, because like you, I went off and I learned as much as I could. And I did as much as I could to help other people so that they don't end up like I did. That's my mission, is that no other mum ever ends up like I did. Or no other woman. You don't have to be a mum to work with me. But
I work with dads as well. It's
oh yeah, I work with women and children. But it is that whole thing of we are thought to abandon ourselves.
And that is mainstream culture. Even now, mainstream culture is abandon yourself, fit in.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy for us, and it's not healthy for our children.
No, and I think that the way to get rid of trauma and to heal trauma, and like what we were saying, it doesn't have to be anything scary or horrific. It can be fun, but it's acknowledging the fact that it's okay to heal, and it's okay to want more. And that doesn't mean that you're not happy with the life that you have, or the kids you have, or the husband you have.
And it doesn't mean that you don't love your parents.
No, it doesn't. But it means that you're ready to love you.
Yeah.
And you're ready to turn around. I want to be better for myself first and for my family. Because when you heal your wound, there is a ripple effect. So when you start to feel better, it ripples through your relationship with your husband, your relationship with your kids, how you choose to work, how you have that relationship with your parents that you always thought was brilliant. But when you actually heal your own stuff, then you can go, you turn up to them.
The real relationship.
It really expands the beauty in all areas of your life. And it's really powerful.
And this is why, and this is the interesting thing, and it's why in my parenting practice I talk about the healing and the skills, because people just want the skills. They're like, how do I get them to put their shoes on? And I get it. I have 3 kids under 7. Aoife is a mom of 4. Hers are older now. They're all teens now, aren't they? Or are they?
16 to 7 is my range.
16 to 7. Oh, that's a good range. And, but when, you know, they were all very young at some point, and at some point you were trying to get out of the house. And my kids don't go to school, but I know that yours do. And you had to get to school on time.
we had school refusal. My eldest has special needs. My eldest has autism and ADHD. He had epilepsy. He has sensory needs. He has a whole host of stuff. So, like, I do get.
Aoife's written a book about that, by the way. I will share links in the show notes. It's amazing.
So I do get how hard it is for parents.
Yeah. So we want skills, but no, not even but. And the healing and that ripple effect, it almost negates the need for skills. I mean, I use skills now, and I know, Aoife, you use, you know, practical skills, and I shared one today. Today's the 30th of June when we're recording this. I shared one today, and it was about what to do when your children are fighting, you know, one of your kids basically beating up the other one. And that's a common request.
Years ago.
That happens in every household. Yeah. And so, yeah, there is a place for skills. There's a place for, what do I do when this happens? What steps do I go through? And the healing in ourselves is what ripples out, and it makes it less likely, because we completely change the energy and the dynamic in our household when we are calmer and when we are not triggered, because the big red buttons aren't blaring anymore. We are able to be, okay, my child is communicating with me through their behavior. What do they need? How can I support them? And that's completely different to, you know, your body and your mind is trying to avoid harm. And that's why we shout. That's why we push people away. That's why we shut down. And when you heal, so you take that out. I mean, of course, Aoife, you'll attest, this is a lifelong, you know, the healing isn't something.
God, yeah, we go on journey, because there's always things that triggers us, or our kids trigger us, you know, as we get older. We're like, oh my God, why? Like I said this week, I was supposed to be taking my kids away for 3 days, and they rejected me to stay at home and do their own. I'm like, oh my God, there's trauma right there. Your own children, they don't want to spend time with you anymore. I'm joking. We have other holidays booked. It was just, my kids do love me, I swear.
But so you think like, oh yes, I feel healed this area, and yes, you have. Or, you know, maybe you have now, and then it pops up in 3 weeks' time, you know, or even a year's time, you're like, oh no, that hurt.
I thought I dealt with that. And
and then you go back and you have the skills to deal with it. So when we talk about skills, it's not just, how do I get my kids to do this? How do I get them to eat their greens? How do I get them to go to bed on time? Yeah, that is part of it. Yes, there is things you can do, but it's skills to support yourself, so that when it pops up, we're curious, we don't blame, and we just go, oh.
But you can remember, if you're being triggered and you're having this emotional response, you can't remember the skills, because in your head you're going, I know I saw that thing from Laura, I know she did this, I know she talked, the love of God, I cannot remember what it is. Because your head isn't responding, your body isn't responding. It goes into that fight or flight, it goes into those natural responses, and you go, where when you come to a place of your heels, your mind is just like, oh yeah, hold on a minute there, just give me 30 seconds, and the things come back to you, because you're like, okay, I remember that easier.
Wow. On the turning point. Yeah, on the turning point program, I teach people, there's always a half-second delay between Vietnam when it's a long call, by the way. Sorry about that. Yeah, one of those skills that we teach, yes, it's how to get the kids to do stuff, and how to get them not to do things like biting and things. And like we said, that's part of a holistic approach to the family life, isn't it? But it's also, you know, what to do in the moment where you know now, because you know you've done a bit of healing, you know, oh, I'm being triggered, what do I do? So we talk about that.
There's a whole chapter in my book. When I did the parenting courses, because Evan has special needs, you had to go on all these parenting courses, and there's a chapter in it called, you know, press the pause button, and I literally say I couldn't find the remote, never mind press pause, because I hadn't done the healing. I was so overwhelmed, and I was like, I have this child with special needs, I have other kids, I had, you know, issues with my marriage, I had so much going on. It just seemed like the most bonkers thing to say, just go, you just need to press pause in the moment. And I'm like, fuck right off. I don't have a moment. I have a child who's eating another child here in front of me. I have somebody who smeared poo on me. Like, for the love of God, how do I do? And they're going, You just need to press pause, Aoife. And I was like, come to my house and show me how to do
but and this is why just the skills-based approach, this is why people say, I've read every book, I've listened to every podcast, it's not working. I said, because there's more. But and I love my kids so much. Yes, you do. The healing comes at the same time, tandem with the skills. And that is how and it's not just about being the parent you want to be, is it? If it's about being the person you want to be,
and that's
living your real life for yourself.
It's the whole point.
As your children.
It's that holistic thing that, you're not just a mum. And that's why when I talk to my clients, I say, what are you when you take away your label? The mum, the wife, the partner. How many people if you looked at your phone, how many people in your phone are just Mary's mum, Jack's mum? You just become this mum and you forget who you are. And
there was definitely a point in 2019. I think it was that I talk about this as well, and I've done a blog post on it as well on the website, that there was a point in 2019 where I just stopped functioning for about 3 days. And things that precipitated that was the idea of where I realized that unless I made changes, the next 20 years was going to be the same.
Yeah.
And I also realized at the same time that if you took away teacher, mom, wife, daughter, if you took away all of that, I was like, I don't know. And my body just stopped working for like 3 days. And this is the lesson of the low. So it leads us into the next podcast I think we're going to do. Is the lesson of the low, and how we listen to the whisper before it becomes the roar, because you can't hide from it. It will get you.
It will. There is no escape. And that's the thing, whether it's big cheese or little cheese, it gets you. So
and you can choose to ignore it, but isn't it just nicer just to invest the time? And sometimes we talk about this too, like it does cost money, like you do have to pay, and ideally, there's no NHS here because I'm in Vietnam where it's all private healthcare and things, which is a strange way to be. Vive la NHS, by the way, save it. But wouldn't it be nice if, well, nice isn't even a good enough word, what a pointless word, wonderful, healing, beautiful for humanity, if people could access healing.
Yes. And holistic healing, where you actually go, and that's the thing, I suppose, we go to the root cause without re-traumatizing you. I suppose that's the highlight of one of the things I would like to get across. You don't have to relive the trauma to heal the trauma. And I'm really,
we are going to do a whole series on that, because people are often worried. And I will admit that, I did a session with Aoife yesterday, and you can tell how we talk to each other. Like, I trust you, and I've known you for so long, and I love you so much. One day we will meet, and I guarantee you I will cry in the street in Dublin. Guaranteed. and yet still, I was really aware of, when we started the session, I had like a fluff of anxiety.
But
that's normal. That is normal and natural, because you're doing something different and something strange, and it is a bit intimidating.
And I can't even articulate what I'm going to do with you in some ways. I'm like, it's grand. Yeah. We're just going to do it, and let's just see how it feels. And I'm like, I will tell you, like, oh yeah, there's hypnosis, there's energy work, there's this and this. But it doesn't. You don't know what that is until you actually feel it.
Yeah. So we are doing a whole episode on that. We're going to do a whole episode on hypnosis and other work, and how it's safe, because it makes sense to me. It absolutely makes sense to me that some people are like, I don't want to go forward because I'm worried that it's going to be more scary, it's going to re-traumatize me, I don't want to relive these experiences, and actually you don't have to. So I think we're going into the other podcast, so I'm going to stop us there. So we could talk forever.
We could talk forever, and we will.
So yeah, I think the takeaways from today are, we all have trauma. We all have it, and it's a scary word, and in some ways it's become sensationalized by the media, hasn't it? Like,
yes,
we've been joking about the spidey senses and it's got to be horrific, but a lot of people believe that, and it's not true. Trauma is just something. Think of it as a blockage, and yes, it can be capital T, and yes, it can be lowercase t, and you have a right to heal. And when you do, the ripple effect is profound, through you, through your family, through your relationship with your partner, if you have one, and just through the world. And it's beautiful. So thank you very, very much for your time, Aoife, and we will have you on again soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye, everybody.